Hello all and welcome back to the YouTube channel of alldaychesstd. Today we're going to be doing our Rook and Rook Endgame, also known as the Rook Roller Endgame, which is very fun and easy to learn. The reason we're going through these endgames very specifically so that you know each one down. Soon we're going to get into more complex ones, so stay tuned. It would really help a lot if you subscribed and liked the videos and turn on post notifications so you will get a notification each time we post a video. And, as a special today, I will be posting my social media links down below. The All Day Chess social media is growing. It's not growing as much as our YouTube, thanks to you guys, but it is growing. So it would be really appreciated if you went down there and gave it a follow. And we'll also have our Discord, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook page. So be sure to check those out. So guys, enough with this intro. Let's just get in straight with the video. So, last video we did the queen and rook and king versus the opponent's king. So we'll just look at a couple ways to do that right now. So, we have our queen and rook on e2 and e3, and the opponent's king is on d6. So, remember we want to gain the file and restrict them to very little space. The easiest way we can do that right now is probably queen b5. We can also play moves like queen h5 or rook e5, but I like queen b5 the best. Why? Because queen b5 is a little bit closer to the center than the h5 square, and if we play rook e5, our rook and queen are still on the same file, so it might cause some trouble and it might take us some more moves. So we'll play queen b5, and then after the king moves back to c7, then instead of trying to go for any check with rook e7 or rook c3 or something, we can simply keep gaining. We can play rook to e6, and then this gains the 6th rank, and then our queen takes care of the 5th rank, and then the king will have to move either to c8 or to d8. It doesn't matter. Let's say he plays to d8. Here we have to be a little bit careful, because after a move such as queen b7, then we lose our advantage and it becomes a stalemate and it's a draw. So we have to be careful here and think for a little bit. We want to figure out how we can gain this 7th file, right? But our only square to go is is b7, but that's stalemate. Because if we go to d7, they can just take our queen, right? So now what we can do actually is we can play queen to d5 check. So now the king will move over, and now we can play rook to c6 check. And now instead of moving our pieces this way, in this format, we're moving them sideways across the board, which can lead to another checkmate. Like if the king comes to b7, can play queen to b5, the king moves wherever, and we can play rook to a6. So we were going forward, we were moving forward, and after we got to a point where we couldn't, or it would take lots of moves to get our queen onto this 7th rank, then all of a sudden what we do is we change sideways and we go and we checkmate our opponent. So let's move into example number 2, which is the rook and rook. In this position, we can see black has 2 rooks and white has a king. So this checkmate may be a little bit harder, but we're just using similar and same ideas. So we want to get our rooks on two of these files which are next to each other, right? So for example, the F and E file, but that won't work because one of our rooks is already on the H file. So to make it easier for ourselves, we can just bring our other rook to the G file, correct? But let's say it's white to move. So white can move their king over here. We'll still move our rook to this G file. And then if they come any closer, now we cannot play here anymore, because then they can simply take our rook. So that means we'll have to swing our rook all the way over to the other side, and then let's say they attack our rook, then our rook moves all the way over to the other side. Now we're still on files next to each other, except they're different files. So now if the king moves, we can play check, and then we can start our diagonal pattern once again. Just keep moving our pieces diagonally, very smooth. Oh, can you play here? No, because the king will take. So you have to swing your rook all the way to the other side, and if they attack you, you swing your other rook all the way over. But hear me out. You don't want to move your rook to this square, because then they are not on files next to each other. They're on the same file. So we want to move our rook all the way over and just drop it one before the file that our other rook is on. This continues and keeps our diagonal so that these rooks are on opposite diagonals. One's over here and one's over here, right? And then once the king moves, we can simply move one of them, our diagonal pattern, and you guessed it, we'll move our other rook over to this G1 square, which is our other diagonal pattern, and that's a checkmate. So the reason these checkmates are a little bit harder is because the rooks, they cannot attack diagonally. They can only move forward, backwards, left, and right. They cannot attack diagonally, which means if the king comes in diagonal next to them, so if this rook was not here, for example, and the king was a diagonal away, so in a position like this, normally if this was a queen, our king would not be able to go to any of these squares. But since this is a rook, if possible, our king could come to this square, this F4 square, because the rook does not attack or protect diagonally, which leaves the white king closer to the black rooks, which is then harder to checkmate. So that's why rooks are harder, because you need to always be aware of swinging over to the other side so you don't come in diagonal contact with the opponent king. And if you come in diagonal contact, you move your rook as far away as possible, but not on the same file. So that might be a little bit confusing, but that's why we're going to head into example number 2. The king is close to us, but do not fear because the rook roller is here. We got this. We can still checkmate our opponent king. So, we have our two rooks. We need to get them next to each other. So, the easiest and fastest way to do that is bring our rook all the way over to the other side. Now these two rooks are next to each other and they are diagonally opposite, which is even more convenient. The reason we don't want to play rook to c3 is because they can simply take our rook. So, we play rook to a3, and then they move their king anywhere. Let's just say, come here. And now our rook can't come to this square because the king is guarding it. So we should swing our rook all the way over to the other side. And then let's say they attack us again. No problem. We'll swing all the way over to the other side. And now we can just keep doing our diagonal pattern. We can just keep moving it. Very smooth. The reason this works is because one rook guards the previous file and the next rook checks the opponent king. So that means the king has to go back. And then we can continue guarding. But here, once again, it won't work. So you have to swing over to the other side. The reason we have to swing all the way over to the other side or to the second file to the other side is because if we play rook here, then after they play king here, we still can't play rook over here. So we're not gaining anything still. So we need to move all the way over to the other side. So it takes a while for the black king to come and be in attacking range. So now after this, let's say they move, and then we can go check and checkmate. Okay, wow. I hope you guys got that, and we'll go into maybe one last example. Now for our last example, it's going to be a little bit of a funny one. You can see we're all trapped up here, but it does not matter because for our two rook checkmate, we do not need our king. Yup, we do not need it as you've seen in the previous examples. So now we need to checkmate our opponent king. So let's see how we can get our rooks next to each other. If we move this rook over here, we can simply take it. That's not good. If we move our rook over here, this is fine. And now let's say the king moves. We can move our other rook over here. And then let's say the king moves. We can do our rook roller. And then the king comes up to attack our rook, right? So we have to swing it over to the other side. And then let's say the king comes here. So now we can't play checks, right? Because the king would take. So we swing it over to the other side. And then the king comes. We check. The king moves. We check. The king moves. We give another check. The king moves. And here, we'll bring it over to the other side. It doesn't matter which square, but you always want to go as far as possible. The king moves. Here, remember guys, we cannot play check because the king can take, right? We can play check here, but it's very useless because our goal is to gain the file, right? The rook roller. So we want to just keep moving our rooks in that same pattern to gain as many squares as possible. If we play here, the king can still come here. and if we keep checking, we're not gaining anything out of this, right? So then, instead, we want to move our rook all the way over to the other side. But remember, if we play here, this is not good, because our rooks are next to each other. We don't want our rooks like this. We want them next to each other, but on separate files. So that means we have to move our rook all the way over here, and then the king moves over, and then we can give our check, and then wherever he goes, we can checkmate. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this rook tutorial, well, the double rook tutorial, the Rook Roller. I really hope you enjoyed. Please be sure to subscribe, like the video, share with friends and family, and post down in the comments what I should do below. Please be sure to check the description for all the social media. It really means a lot. Thank you guys so much, and see you in the next video.